Just ask if you've joined. Just please mute your side of things and turn cameras off. And we'll start shortly. There's a few people still trickling in. Okay, well, we might start. Still some people to come through, but we'll catch up as we go. So welcome everyone to today's talk on landform stability and grazing as post-mining land use. We've got a fantastic presentation and content to share today. My name is Jonathan Sanders with the CPPA Group Technical Working Committee, backgrounds in environmental management and closure planning, and very excited to facilitate this session today. So as closure planners, our work takes place across many diverse First Nation communities throughout Australia and indeed the world where we operate. And for that, we're grateful to live, learn and work in these areas. So in the spirit of reconciliation, acknowledgement of the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, connections to the land, sea, community, and we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that to all Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people today. As a heads up, we are recording this session. These technical presentations are available on the CPPA knowledge base, and so we hope to record the discussions and learnings from this and have that available at a later session. Just some etiquette. Please mute your mics, turn your cameras off, and hold questions to the end. There'll be a question session at the end, so we can hold that. But there's a bit of a chat section in the talk, so add your questions in there. We'll moderate it and bring up those questions at the end of the session. So those not familiar with the Closure Planning Practitioners Association, the vision is essentially to promote global leading practice skills in closure within Australia by representing and engaging with closure planning practitioners to develop and build that competency base. So the technical talk we're talking about today helps communicate and promote that professional capacity through knowledge sharing. A quick shout out for abstracts. There's some really good talks that have happened and are planned to happen. So we do urge people, if you've got an idea, a story, some lessons that are applied that professionals can learn from, please use the QR code here or submit an abstract idea. A big thank you to our sponsors. We couldn't do a lot of this without these key sponsors. So for those companies on the screen, thank you very much. And it's a great contribution. Some upcoming events. The CPPA is always trying to connect practitioners and promote new events. So have a look on the website for upcoming things. There's some really great things in the pipeline. And just to be advised of future events by email, use the QR code or link here to become an ordering member. There's an app as well. So the talk we have today is around landform stability and grazing as post-mining land use. We have Brendan Roddy from Engeni, a seasoned professional in this space around landform soils, and we're really excited to have Brendan join us today. I'll pass over to Brendan in a sec, but just a quick cap on his background. A very experienced and varied past from research development throughout Australia and New Zealand. He's been with the Queensland mining regulator in Perth, Queensland, and back again. And then had a role in the head office for the mine closure for a tier 1 miner, and currently the principal for landform and soils at Engeni. So the talk today is around post-mining land use. It's a very popular and topical topic. The Office of the Queensland Mine Rehab Commissioner in a recent review found that leading practices established and demonstrated grazing as a post-mining land use are not clearly defined. So this talk from Brendan will focus on those technical aspects that make grazing problematic from a risk perspective in trying to achieve these broad long-term goals. So with that, thank you for joining, and I'll pass over to Brendan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Let's just before you mute, just give me a shout, make sure that that's working. You can see that.
Yep, looks great.
Great. Sorry, I've got special guest Chris. People in the office are used to me yelling, young person to help me. I remember the moon landing. So thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. So I just want to, before I get stuck in, just do a little bit of a table setting before I launch in. Number one is, if you're getting that this is an anti-farmer talk, you're getting the wrong end of the pineapple. These pumpkin-headed blokes here are just like the pumpkin-headed idiots I went to school with. Heaps of mates who are farmers, so this is not an anti-farming diatribe at all. And that's also to say that grazing on rock dumps or waste rock dump, WRD over this side, OSAs over west, is possible. And I have seen examples of grazing, successful grazing, the mining companies, but they have pastoral companies that control the grazing, stocking rates and things along those lines. So what I want to prosecute today, today's hypothesis is that while grazing on waste rock dumps is technically possible, it's not worth the risk. And hopefully that's a little bit spicy, a little bit controversial for a Wednesday afternoon. So again, look, I become more aware of this point as I get older in terms of really how much I don't know, and really to talk authoritatively about this, I think you need at least 12 different PhDs. I tried to find the most agricultural photo of myself. This is me up in far north Queensland helping a mate put in a cattle crush and doing some fencing at his property. But the other thing too is in another life, a boss did a personality test, and that graph actually tells you that, strangely enough, I spend all day bickering with engineers, but that I've got an engineer's personality. That is a really high appetite for data and a really low appetite for risk. So again, everything that's coming after this, you can shade in that light as well. And just while I've got a captured audience and people who may be working in central Queensland, this is a bit of a acknowledgement of a lot of guys who you know, I keep on saying I'm not inventing, I'm just remembering, and the work of particularly Bevan Emerton, you'll hear me cite him many times, John Burgess, Ross Gooley, really good guys who have now passed away, Bernie Kirsch and Neil Dale. So those in central Queensland probably know those names. So grazing, let's get stuck in. Word association, you think of grazing, this is what comes up in my mind, sort of gambling, land somewhere in the UK. But let's have a look at grazing in the Australian context. And this is moving from intensive to extensive. And again, I may not even, this is the terminology I use in my mind. So feedlots, that's usually sized with tens of hectares. The other improved pastures, generally those holdings are hundreds of hectares, and this is where I'm used to, you know, looks familiar to me, down in New South Wales. And again, it's interesting that probably that the cattle and sheep, they have those bloodlines, you know, going back to the UK. Then we start to get more extensive grazing, and those farms are thousands of hectares. And again, you're looking at, I'm pretty sure they're drought master breeds, so that's a Brahman cross, you can tell. Now starting to get bloodlines going back to India, like again, their humps on their back and a very characteristic. You see those dewlaps, that loose skin underneath their necks, probably not so different from me as I get older. Then you talk about this really rangelands, and those holdings are bigger than, you know, some countries in the UN. So if we want to try and relate that, I guess that grazing on improved pastures probably analogous to the Hunter Valley coal mines. The extensive grazing is probably in central Queensland, and the rangelands you'll find examples of that in far north Queensland, the Pilbara, etc. So again, just looking, you know, going back through the library, some of the examples I pulled. This is south of Mount Isa, and as you can see in my rear vision mirror, like I'm not taking this at a foot of hills. It's just like this forever. We're jumping in the Pilbara now, and you can see that arrow. This is the first time in a presentation I've ever actually highlighted cattle dung, I believe in a lecture. And again, this is some of that extensive. And quite frankly, I just don't know how stock survive in this area. We're jumping up into far north Queensland in the southern Gulf country. Beautiful country. I just love this, but very extensive grazing in this southern Gulf country. So really, say something like for the West Australian sort of viewers, it's not traditionally sort of grazing. So it's really, I guess the aims would be looking at that landform stability, where that extensive, if cattle sort of encounter where you kind of keep that landform stability, if any, after relinquishment, stock tends to encounter that. So really today, that rangeland stuff, that really extensive in that 300 mil area, you know, it's quite funky, but really the focus of the talk will be on the central Queensland and certainly areas I'm more familiar with. So I was supposed to win the lotto last night. I was looking this as a purchase for, I was going to make an offer today, but unfortunately we've had to delay that. So this is a 15,000 hectare property. And as you can see, they talk about a stocking rate about 28,000 DSC. So what does that mean? And this comes back to you know, talking about that stocking rate. So DSC means dry sheep equivalent. So that's a 50 kilo non-lactating, non-pregnant ewe sheep. And again, the southern tablelands of New South Wales, where that land value, where you get that rainfall, where it's worthwhile sowing grasses and fertilising that, you can stock that between 6 and 14 DSC. Some of those photos where you saw in the Pilbara and far north Queensland and in the rangeland, they talk about one animal equivalent. So as a standard here, they talk about a 400 kilo non-pregnant, I couldn't write cow, a head of cattle, consuming about 8 kilos of dry matter per day. So that far north Queensland, southern Gulf country, you talk about 35 to 146 hectare, 146 football fields to support one head of cattle. That's how the change in intensity and again that extensive sort of grazing just really blows my mind. So as promised, we said we're going to jump back to central Queensland, and again, not making any assumptions. So good old coal. This is the direction of pit advance. So pre-strip stockpile the topsoil. You'll hear me talk about tertiary. And as you can see, it's a very soily, unconsolidated material, generally about 70 million years. And then you go down into the Permian rock, and again, it's largely sedimentary rock that hosts the coal, and good old drag lines just throw that over the coal. There was an animation of a blast, but anyway, and probably the point with that animation that's not going to play is really how essentially we've changed everything. And when I was on site, I talked to the guys, particularly the geotechs. They want to keep the rocky stuff at the bottom and the fine stuff in the top. And for landform stability, I want them to flip that cake. I want the rocky stuff at the top and the unconsolidated stuff at the end. But guess who wins? So as you see, the dumps are formed. It's tipped out. This is for a zero cut fill balance when you doze that down. Then it's typically topsoil seeded, fertilised, and then that's progressively rehabilitated as you move up the slope. So trying to track that back, again, grazing as an end land use has been sort of on the books in central Queensland from the 70s. So again, you need cattle. Cattle aren't mountain goats. They have a limit in terms of their batter gradient. Okay, cattle need to eat, so you need to sow grass. Grass needs topsoil. So again, you apply that topsoil, you fertilise that, you seed that, and generally it's a spring planting. So trying to track back the derivation of that 15% landform, I'm going to profit that it comes back to this ACARP report that really said that, anything over 12%, it starts to become quite risky. And there, you actually need more than vegetation over those. And again, they said 12 to 15%. Mine side, mine planners, engineers, God bless them, 15%. That becomes a really entrenched idea in terms of gradient. Now, here I cite Dave Williams for those people who know. So we think if at 15%, we're minimising the risk of erosion. But David calls it landform flattening. And what we're doing, and this is an example of a dump closure tent, is we're building pyramids. So if you look at sloping land being areas of higher risk, we're actually maximising the areas of high risk and minimising those areas of low risk. So let's do a couple of laps. Let's see how this landform is sort of working out. That dozed, topsoil, seeded, fertilised, probably gypsum. This is one wet season. Sorry about my formatting skills. This is the top of batter. This is where hopefully that's coming through. You can see that rilling. Site is aware of that, so they're trying to sort of retrofit drains onto that. This is a close-up of 10%. Again, you can see where they've actually tried hay mulching on top of the fertiliser and the gypsum and everything else, and we see that rilling and small gullies starting to develop. One wet season on 15%. This is again the example of 7 to 8%. The light vehicle track is at the tower slope, and you can tell how progressively the older rehab at the bottom and the newer stuff at the top. Here we have 15%, and we've tried contour banks in this particular example, again to no avail. This one is 15% and actually has been hydromulched. I don't know if we're going to get that signed off. Here we jump to 9%. Sorry, the arrow's skewed. That's meant to indicate the sediment fans down the bottom of the slope. Again, 10%, one wet season before the veg. Oh, hang on, what do we have here? We have a Windows XP screensaver. This is some stuff I'm sure we can all get behind. That just looks absolutely magnificent. This doesn't even look like Australia. But if you're an old meddlesome busybody, what I point out is those yellow arrows, when you look down on Google Earth, actually indicate the formal drainage. The red arrows actually indicate the gully repair that has been done retroactively after the wet season, and plus the rills that are formed that you all can't see from that low sort of angle. And again, when you walk this batter, a lot of rills and cracks in that as well. Same 15% offset drains, berms. I see this, and again, you see that pattern of the older rehab at the bottom, and then as you move up the landform. And the arrow there is to indicate actually where this soil starts to rill, okay, and that's initiated from the top of slope. So it's a bit of a summation that this is what we see. So 30 centimetres of topsoil, 15%. Grass species, they throw out a few trees. This particular case, they were throwing out some manure as well. And again, where you see I don't know if anybody would call that good, that huge sediment fan down the slope. And you may be able to pick out, this is a bit of an inward turn as well with the landform that is actually concentrated flows and where you get those larger gullies. So just to look at that in a little bit more detail. So where you get that topsoil over that tertiary material, this is where you get your gullying, your deeper erosional features. They did realise this particular site, so they did trial some rock sheeting before they put the topsoil over. What happened there is you, again, quickly developed rills, but in this case, those rills started to widen. So again, let's try and solve this with much more sort of engineering. Let's put in more berms, let's put in rock spine drains. And again, you start to move in and see how this has worked. Again, the assumption of berms, if there is erosion, it partitions or isolates the lower landform from erosion events. But yeah, not particularly so. And again, you see how this landforming is taking place. And yeah, I just can't take my eyes off that sediment fans at the bottom of the slope. So you may very well challenge me and say, okay, Brendan, that's just your opinion. Okay, what are a few rills amongst friends? So again, with the group, I don't know what we could caucus on in terms of an agreed target. It appears to be that we assess erosional stability in terms of tonnes per hectare per year. Seems to be the best. I've seen reports at 5 tonnes per hectare per year as a target, 20 tonnes per hectare per year. I've been helping a student out at the University of Arizona. He just quantified some of that erosion on some of those slides that you've just seen. One of those was 1,350 tonnes per hectare over a 12-month period. And then the other one was 950 tonnes. And that 950 tonnes, we actually filtered out the rills 10 centimetre or less. So that's actually probably worse too in terms of that situation. So we're looking at 2 to 3 orders of magnitude past our goal, just in terms of erosion. Something else that I see as wrong, that when we topsoil, then when we add fertiliser, what we're doing is we're actually creating a competitive advantage for weeds and for buffel grass. So again, the image on the right looks really good, but it's in effect a monoculture. It's buffel grass and Sally wattle. So we see that as well. And again, where we're getting really good good grass cover. We're still getting gully formation. This was actually seeded with trees, native trees. Again, the grass just is so aggressive, it outcompetes. It's hard for the trees to come up. And again, you go back to the literature, that's also been borne out, that fertiliser, particularly for buffel grass, just outcompetes anything. You may wish to get some natives up, and where that you're actually topsoiling and fertilising, it makes it extremely difficult. Now, I'd also like to show the group these photos as well. And these are actually central Queensland undisturbed cattle properties on very flat natural 0 to 3%. Now, when I say undisturbed, obviously tree clearing has been done historically, but again, just on cattle properties and looking at the risk of what we're trying to achieve on mine sites. So this is undisturbed, and again, it'd be quite easy to see. It's probably the topsoil's fine. Once that topsoil's nicked, you're getting into these dispersive subsoils. I'm very sure that that's the case. And once you nick that country and you see the landscape very flat, once you sort of nick that, then away it goes. Why? Why is this? I took this photo on top of a dragline boom. This is ahead of the high wall. So this is where we're actually stripping, stockpiling and reusing the topsoil. So everything you see in the Bowen Basin is literally, it's alluvial, colluvial sourced material. Okay, it's unconsolidated sediment. Everything you see in the background there, everything that's sticking up is a different geology. So this is where we're getting our topsoil. As you see here in close-up, I call it 1 proof above beach sand. This is what we use for our rehab. This is a prepared slope ready for, cross-rip seeded, ready for the wet season. Now, again, this is another photo near home. I should stress, state of origin tonight, the great state of New South Wales. Yes, you can graze steeper, largely unwooded pastures, but what's the difference and how's that? Again, as you saw, that we've changed everything. We've blasted, we've flipped the world up, we've trucked, dug, trucked, blasted, we've done everything. Here you see, and you can actually see some cattle, but where you get these flow concentrations, it becomes stabilised because it becomes bedrock controlled. And the other thing is well-structured, clay-rich soils that largely remain undisturbed. So bearing in mind, we're kind of icing a cake and hoping the icing holds everything together. And once you nick that icing, then it's spoiled all the way. Well, we don't know what it is. And again, if it's acid forming, whatever the risk is, so that's what makes me particularly nervous. Another reason in central Queensland for that landform failure is the climate. Again, it's summer storm dominated. The West Australian peeps will know it's all those cyclonic events coming in, generally tends to be really discrete rainfall events. So really, again, I'm not going to attempt the animation here, but this is our prepared landform. That was the 950 tonnes per hectare per year. And again, getting those storms hosing. I'll let this slide. It was all around social media, but so that's steel bolts poured concrete during our central Queensland storm, and you got this beautiful tilthy, yeah, it's just how that hangs out. This is also something really preachy about, is the undisturbed, in terms of risk factor, is sodicity, and it's very poorly understood, of increasing the degree of difficulty of what we're trying to achieve. So I had engineers come up to me and ask me, can we please control wombats? No, that's not the case. For those of you who have been to Moranbah near McDonald's, this is the Grosvenor Creek. There's been no flow in that for 11 months, but again, that sediment is staying in suspension. And what you're seeing here is actual dam, a turkey's nest. That's just the light vehicle access. So what you're seeing is just the flow, the water within centimetres. It's starting to initiate a rill, and then it's piping and tunnelling. It doesn't even make 3 metres over to the other side of the road. So I was able to get traction with the engineers and tell them the risk is you don't need flowing water for failure. Like it's dissolving soil, if you like. This is really old. This is over 20-year rehab. Again, you see that buffel grass, Sally Wattle. This is ute swallowing, tunnelling. And again, that beautiful vegetation cover. But again, this is lucky I wasn't lazy. I actually got out and walked the track first. This is a really poor image, I know, but I was walking over 7 to 8% rehab, really great veg cover. What I'm trying to indicate there is it was really surprising, the cracking that was starting on that particular rehab. What you're seeing here, this is the top of slope. They just put in a control, a contour bank, and unlike perhaps where further down the slope you'll get increased rills, this is actually failing from the top of slope, and again on less than 10%, very low dump. So why is that? I come back to the great Bevan Emerton. So really, he spent decades up in central Queensland doing a lot of rehab monitoring, and he said, yeah, you're going to get severe to moderate, just even sheet erosion that on sites that are not rock clad. So, and that means even if you've got, you do get vegetation, even the sheet flow will cause erosion. So this is just a 3% landform. So we rely on veg for stability. We don't irrigate. We need rainfall to get the veg up. We get summer storms, and what we're seeing here is a real network cut into the slope, even at 3%. In these crappy soils before we even get to the point of, total veg cover that's going to save us. Sorry, this is me nerding out. It's just a little batter. They got 100% veg cover. This is only about 3 metres tall. They even put tree trash on it. They did a really great job. But again, the material, even the sheet wash, was enough to, rather than rill initiation, you've got these drop structures. You can walk in and you're sort of at nose height, to these gullies that are being formed. I'll skip over that. So there's also another whole host of risk factors. I think I should be able to stop or make my case with that, but I want to continue. Sorry, I believe the kids talk about being triggered. So when I hear the word risk, to me, that means lack of data, but I understand that that's sort of vogue at the moment. So I want to also sort of introduce you to another range of sort of risk factors as I see them. So, and to me, this is something I can't get on board with. With grazing on waste rock dumps, we're relying on vegetation for that stability. At the same time, hoping to put 450 kilo cloven hoof vegetation removal machines on them. So sorry, call me old fashioned. So let's talk about stock. I mean, cattle need to be watered, so they do preferentially graze around those watering points. And again, you can see that they're not stupid. They'd rather eat closer to that watering point. So when they go over that topsoiled and seeded batter, again, they're going to concentrate around watering points. They're also social. They walk in trails. They hang around in camps, which causes erosion. So, and again, the action of that hoof, I'm sure you've all heard the saying, we should be eating kangaroos or camels. Again, that soft toe. That's just an example of a crocodile seeder. And you use that in rougher countries. And what that does is that nicks the surface so that the seed can be placed into a rocky cover. And, we've got cattle kind of doing that. So another factor is nutrient decline. So where we see, once we've sort of placed, and I've not seen mine sites in central Queensland going back, maintaining, fertilising, top dressing after the fact. Okay, much more the higher value land, say in southern Queensland or New South Wales. You must remember we're actually also creating with grazing an energy exporting system. So you can summarise the top quote by, what goes in, what goes out. One of my co-authors, Long Ben Hwan from the University of Queensland, he says, in 3 years, these things are kind of tapped out. The way you do that, you manage that pasture decline in central Queensland, the value of the land is not productive enough to go and throw out sort of fertiliser. So in undisturbed regimes, what they do is they mechanically agitate the surface, they throw out legumes, and what you're seeing there in the other photo is pasture improvement, central Queensland style, not with fertilisers, but roughing up the surface and putting out those legumes. So, and as part of pasture, and again, as I said, what do I know about the species that have been listed as potentially dieback, and particularly for buffel grass? There's some talk or gossip I hear from a farming mates about rusts, and we're putting our faith in these exotic species as well. So that's also a risk factor. And buffel grass, I was only alerted to this recently, that it's now really a declared weed, I believe, in South Australia and the Northern Territory. Again, West Australian peats are used for those beautiful native wild flowers. And again, once you get buffel, even the risk of outcompeting that. I've seen, again, you get a really great strike in this rehab, you get the Rhodes grass up, you get the buffel grass, but then after year 3, you start to get the increase in weeds. So particularly Parthenium and Feral Leukina. So this is an example where outside the mining lease, the local council has a biosecurity plan where these species are actually on the banned list, whereas inside the mining lease, these are often a breeding area for these weeds to take over. This is, for those unfamiliar, this is Leukina, that dark green. This is a creek diversion, and again, it just has gone into the waterline, just completely out, competes everything. It's such a shame. It's such a great coloniser. I wish it could be used for the force of good, but I don't think it can. And this is this aerial photo. What you see, I just want to put your attention to the old rehab where they've had woodland, and where you see these green areas where they've actually put in pasture, you see these darker, it's very distinctive, this Leukina is coming in and taking over those areas, whereas it's very hard for the Leukina to come in and sort of colonise that established woodland. This was a topic close to my heart, again, because I spent a couple of years in New Zealand. Generally, we don't have the stocking rates, but that is a thing when you're trying to run a pastoral enterprise in terms of water pollution. This is another big thing that I haven't heard described. So it's really what type of farmer are you going to get? So if we're saying vegetation is really important for preventing soil erosion, and we all can agree that to manage that grazing enterprises on, risky, I would say 15% waste rock dumps, we need a high degree of conservatism. But what farmer are you going to relinquish? This is my theory. I think this could be the same in most parts of life. I call it the 10-80-10. You get 10% of farmers, they're the chair of the local land care group, really, innovative, forward-looking. 80% of the other farmers are looking over the back fence, waiting for him to stuff up, or if it is a good, they'll jump on. And then you've got the bottom 10%. I colloquially use, for polite company, let's call them country lovers, and possibly shouldn't be farming at all. So again, when surveyed in central Queensland, most farmers are on board or at least neutral for the need to conservatively farm if they take over rehab grazing. But then when asked who should make that decision, well, if you know farmers, they're going, well, I'm going to make those decisions. All right. So, and if they've got boarding school fees to pay. Another thing is fire. When we look comparatively, we look at fuel loads. So that buffel grass, mine rehab, looking at 9 tonnes. Native woodland and native Mitchell grasslands are sort of half that at least. And then that fire intensity for that woodland and that mine buffel grass is almost twice. And the authors say in this particular study that represents not only a substantial fire risk for the site, but then also for the surrounding region. And then, what sort of recovery can we guarantee that will regenerate? This is another thing I want to talk about values. So the Queensland regulators talk about in the ERC calculator high-risk dumps. So you talk about copper heap leach. They're sort of assuming about 160K per hectare. Low-risk dumps between $30,000 and $50,000 per hectare. I've come across other clients sort of doing rehab at much higher values, but think about the undisturbed country just outside the mining lease is $2,700 per hectare. And again, the studies I've looked at, the modelling is that really in terms of returns is only going to be 55% to minus 5% that of undisturbed land. So look, to me, and this is what I argue, I think it's been asked and answered. I am extremely nervous about putting grazing on slope landforms, that which where we've harvested the topsoil, putting on a different gradients and expecting a different result. So just briefly, since you asked, what do I think? I think sloping areas in terms of the rock cladding and again, creating a competitive environment for native species. An example, I'm pretty sure this is rock mulching, German Creek, Neil Dale, who I mentioned beforehand. I want to take a second here. This is my favourite bit of rehab, possibly ever. So you're looking at 25 to 40%, as you see that sort of concave at the top of the slope. It's a very rough surface. It's using Site 1 rock. Again, you can see where they've sheeted about half to a metre of this. No topsoil was used. This was aerially seeded, and this was left. And I want to be buried here. So love this. It's not the only site. Again, this is an example, 28, 36%. You can see the amount of rock. And again, this is performing really well because it's getting flows from the batter upwards as well. So yeah, it's material. So the orthodoxy should be, erosion increases as you go lower on the slope. Flow velocity, flow accumulation. But what's the difference? Well, it's just material, it's rock. And again, people, I find it very hard to convince people about growing stuff in non-topsoil, but you'd just be amazed. When you come and visit me in Brisbane, this is actually the BHP people who are 480 Queen can come out of the building this afternoon and actually look across the road. This used to be outside in Jennings' boardroom, 90-degree rock. And again, you've got trees sort of growing out. Who's fertilising that? Who's watering that? Who's looking after that? And again, with rock, you're creating that really, competitive advantage for trees. You see that in central Queensland, steep, rocky, natural landforms. And this is the thing, and I'm not having a knock at Hazelton and Murphy, not for 1 second. Yes, optimum topsoil is nutritious. It's got organic material. It's pH 7. Yep. But in central Queensland, everything under your size 11 steel caps down 110 metres has something wrong with it. And that's the cards that we're sort of dealt with, that we've got to. This is just an example of some really good older rock-clad rehab. And you see in terms of salt, exchangeable sodium percent, really low in terms of facility, cation exchange capacity. Shouldn't use it, but yet there it is. This is something too I'd love to hear about people. I've found it very hard to go and look at certified rehab, find out how it's been certified, what they're doing. But something when I look at it, trying to look at publicly available source, it looks to be, and again, you see an older, lower height dump. Again, it's got a mix of timber on it. Also the same for Oakey Creek, very low gradient country. We're looking at Newlands now. Glencore. This is in New South Wales. Actually, I used to work at this site. This is just from Google Earth. You look at that more traditional sort of grazing, seeing those bare patches, but also noting that where they're putting their waste dumps under a high degree of timber, and again, natives and the photos I was able to find. And also looking overseas, and again, this is the old coal mining over in Virginia, and they're very much about putting these sloping landforms under trees. They talk about the benefits. Yeah, it's not about filling the pockets of farmers, but they talk about this as having the benefits of carbon sequestration areas, wildlife habitat, and water quality. I talked about eutrophication before. So I'm starting to wrap up, I promise. What should our waste rock dumps? I would argue that these risk areas, these sloping areas, rock clad, not the whole dump. We've also got to be more sophisticated. Start thinking about different domains. So where there's an erosion risk, this is what we focus on: rock cladding, native, undisturbed, and maybe on the flat dump tops. I'm still very nervous, but maybe it's a mix of grazing, agroforestry, some sort of land use like that. And again, because I want to be confirmed, so back to Dave Williams, he's come to the same conclusion. He talks about this landform flattening is actually you're increasing the size of your buckets. Yeah, you're lowering the angle, but you're increasing slope lengths. And when you put topsoil on that, you're increasing your risk of erosion. That vegetation won't save you, and that, rock is required. The last point that I'll make, and unfortunately you're going to have to trust me on this one, is that some contacts at site discussing with them their certified rehab. What they did when they grazed it, they didn't use their pastoral company. Whatever reason, they allowed the neighbouring farmer to actually practically use that. This certified rehab, it rilled, it piped, and in fact, the mining company had to go and spend a lot of money re-ripping, repairing, and actually going through the certification process as well. So, and just soak that in. Again, that's the ideal. You get a good strike first wet season. But this was a photo from a mate's property. He was just out, and this is always stuck. Because the other thing we've got to battle is time. I'm really after that multi-decadal, multi-centurial stability. And I just think hopefully what I've tried to convince you of is there's factors now, but there's other risk factors sort of tied in that we're going to have to achieve that. Yeah. And the beauty of modelling is it forces you into that, not 1 or 2 wet seasons, but time. And it's that material. Yeah, where you see those geological controls, I think is what needed. Put the topsoil back where we've got it from, where it's happy. And again, my favourite bit of rehab, this is what our batters should look like. So allowing time, I think coming up to 10 minutes. Yeah, hopefully I make that points, but thank you very much for your attention. Happy if I don't get to your question, contact me via these methods and catch up with you later.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. That was incredible. So many good examples and case studies. Yeah, fantastic. We do have a couple of questions or comments in the chat. I'll read them if you can have a response. So Andrew Butler, he had made a comment. Good point regarding maintenance. Land under rehab is rarely managed as a productive pasture. Monitoring of fertility may not be done. Agronomy, soils folks, and so does not have that focus.
Again, because that carrying capacity and the rainfall and the soil quality determines the value of the land. I got to central Queensland and I was looking for the crop dusters to be putting out fertiliser. It's just not the practice. Darling Downs, yes. Central Tablelands, yes, but it's just not there. But yet we're putting these very nutrient dependent pasture species. I think of it. We're covering the slope with infants, with babies who need that support when we should be covering the slope with Vikings. These can look after themselves. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Peter Agathor, his comment or question was, hello, Dr. Roddy. What about the quality of the materials we have available to do grazing rehab? Is it not a matter of us just applying the proper rate of ameliorates to get the topsoil spoiled to the right chemistry? What do you mean by rock clad? Did this come from the mine and quarry? Does it need to be processed?
So these terms are interchangeable. So rock cladding, and again, hopefully it's come through in terms of the regard I have Bevan Emerton. I picked up the term from him. I read his PhD cover to cover during COVID. He talks about rock cladding. Some of you may know it as rock armouring, rock mulching. Also, I think they're the same. So to me, on those sloping risk areas, it's harder to wash a bowling ball down the slope than it is a 2 millimetre grain of sand. So if you just look at mine sites when you're up at central Queensland and you look at the undisturbed steep rocky areas, you have all these natives that are adapted to pulling, making their own. These are the Viking species, and they're adapted to this. So yeah, I agree. We can artificially, through gypsum, through fertiliser, we can put organic material, trying to pull the material back to Hazelton and Murphy. But as I've said before, what we're then doing is we're attracting hooligans, we're attracting weeds, we're attracting buffel grass. those things. The other thing too that's really unappreciated when you have a rock-clad cover, and this is something that Bevan's decades of experience has shown, that when you have a rocky cover that's sandy and stony and pebbly and rocky, that while the material may begin salty and sodic, that over time you get a movement with monitoring. You see that levels of sodicity go down, salinity goes down. Whereas you put topsoil, it gets wet, it surface seals, there's all sorts of problems. So again, this is one of those good begets good that I've seen. Again, we've seen that in my favourite, was done once, that's over 20 years old. The other thing too about that favourite bed of rehab is there's no engineering structures that are going to require maintenance. There's no spine drains, there's no cross banks, there's no sediment dams. This is all done with a rocky, rough surface. Another reason that you're not tied to that to maintain those features for post-relinquishment as well. Thank you. Good question, Peter.
Yeah, great response. Thank you. We've got a couple more minutes. If there's anything else, Brendan's contact details are on the screen there. Please, I think, reach out and have questions. Will Moore, you've got your hand up. Yeah, feel free to jump on.
Thanks very much. That was a great presentation. I just suppose I sort of got a couple of comments as well. It sort of plays to what you're saying about having a rocky surface. My experience of working with cattle is sort of showing that they don't like rocky surfaces. They don't like walking on it. I mean, goats and sheep certainly don't mind it, but cattle certainly don't. So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind when you can put down rock on certain slopes, because that will certainly keep them out of certain areas. And
Will, can I answer that point, Will? Just one.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry if I didn't make that. So when I talk about rock, I don't mean this grazed at all. It's something I took out a slide for time. Like there's fire, there's all these things. Then there's just native and feral grazing pressure. So whenever I talk about rock cladding on the risk areas on the slope, I am not talking about cattle at all. I'm talking about trying to see value, like the Americans, as carbon sequestration, as being safe, stable, sustainable and non-polluting at a decadal timescale. But I don't want cattle on that. In fact, hoping that rock may, if you know they're wandering, that would discourage them in central Queensland on that slope. Sorry, Will, just wanted to address that. Well,
yeah, no, they definitely don't like go into the range zones up in central Western Australia. That's what I've noticed anyway. So yeah, that's sort of can see that. And I know in previous seed mixes, I've always that with a completion or a post land use being pastoralism, just sort of encouraging putting in non-palatable species in the seed mix, because you know no cattle wants to eat something that doesn't taste good as well. So I always keep that in mind too.
Yeah, and again, there's so much like it's not just one thing. Like it's not just hydromulch, or it's not just jack millet, or it's not just whatever. I find it's so complex. So you know, what is the size of the rock? What's the grading of the rock? Therefore, the infiltration. Therefore, what is the depth of your cover? Like immediately it starts growing in complexity. And I've said native species, then okay, we get this erosionally resistant cover. How are we establishing native? Can we be lucky, like my favourite? We just aerial seed it once and hope it works. Do we need sequencing? Do we need to get a cover crop, then burn it and maybe put in native species? How do we get trees? Is it coated seed? Is it tube stock? I think I have speculations, I have theories, I have observations, but I think these are the studies that are going to be required to, if I've convinced people to actually do it once, do it right, not this route, not maintenance, and something that will track for relinquishment, that very low risk, and particularly for the terms of the regulators as well in the community.
Yeah, no, good point. And we might end on that. That's a really good point to finish up. Yeah, I see a couple of extra comments in the chat, but yeah, please feel free to reach out to Brendan. And just, yeah, thank you very much for your informative presentation. It's, yeah, amazing, diverse background and some really good case studies. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing everyone on the next CPPA technical talk.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah.